Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show. We are broadcasting live our continuing war coverage. There's a conflict here in the Middle East, here in Israel. It started October 7th in a horrific massacre, but it continues now in the Gaza Strip, in the north of Israel, and potentially in Judea and Samaria and other places. It is intense. It is also global. It's a global game that's happening here as well. Let's take a little look at a kind of intro of what has led to this moment and what we're facing today. Israel is still reeling from the news that many fighters were killed, Israeli fighters, Jewish fighters were killed yet last night in the Gaza Strip. Different reports coming in. Right now, the count is at 15 Israeli fighters, including a part of a unit of the Sayeret Givati, the Givati Special Recon Unit, and tank brigades have been hit. And this is a war. And our leaders have warned us that this is going to be a war with costs. They want to eliminate Hamas at all costs, and all costs means that we are indeed paying a cost. Is it a right cost? That is also being debated here in Israel. Should Israel go in with infantry and with tanks, or should we wait until artillery and air force are done? And we have many forces that are part of the fight, including 80 tons of deliveries from the United States that have arrived. I'm not talking about the United States's forces that have arrived and their armaments. I'm talking about just donations that have come from American Jews and pro-Israel, lovers of Israel, non-Jews, Christians, etc. have sent just from the United States 80 tons worth of stuff. So we have a lot of fighting that we're doing. That word "fighting" reminds me of a slogan by one of my heroes, which is Colonel Richard Kemp. He always says, keep attacking. And Richard Kemp has spent most of his life fighting terrorism and insurgency, commanding British troops as a British officer in the world's hotspots, including Afghanistan, Iraq, the Balkans, and Northern Ireland. He's now a writer, a journalist, media commentator, speaker, and also strategic consultancy. And he's also somebody who's fought for Israel in the past and for proving Israel's military's morality, and I'm not surprised that a man who has been in hotspots before is now back in the Middle East, back in Israel, in the hotspot once again. Richard Kemp, shalom and welcome.
Thank you very much, Yishai. I'm just disappointed you haven't introduced me by my Hebrew name, which you gave me, Avner, last time I was in Hebron with you. And
that's right. That's right. That's your nom de guerre. That's your nom de guerre is Avner. That's right, Colonel Kemp.
Even though I'm a goy, I still have a Hebrew name.
That's right. That's right. It's a good one, and it was King David's general. Okay, you could be sitting on a couch in southern UK, but instead you are here. Why?
Well, this is a fight that not just for Israel. This is a fight for world civilization, and if I can be of some assistance here, then this is the place I need to be. And I always believe that if you're going to be commenting or advising or saying anything about a war, you've got to be somewhere close to where the action's taking place. And of course, anyone can sit around in Britain looking at the internet and watching the television and all that stuff. But I think there's no substitute for actually getting a feel for the place and the action. And in the last 3 weeks, I arrived here on Monday of 3 weeks ago, and since then I've been around the borders of Gaza and around the borders of Lebanon, talking to IDF commanders and IDF soldiers on the ground, preparing in the case of Gaza to go in the case of Lebanon, to defend against Hezbollah and potentially go in there as well.
Okay, and let's go back. You've been here for 3 weeks, so let's go back to basically what happened. This Sabbath will mark a month since it all began. I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying, but I have this, and maybe you share this with me, an internal will to respect my enemy. I don't like to just minimize them, and I like to think of my enemy as cunning, smart, and serious, so that I take him seriously. I think that Hamas executed a brilliant strike against Israel, wreaking unbelievable psychological, emotional, physical havoc, burning buildings, and destroying families, etc. First thing, what's your assessment of Hamas's attack, and what do you think their real goal is? I mean, it clearly wasn't a strike to destroy Israel. We had a colleague of ours, Mordechai Kedar, Dr. Kedar, on the show here. He posited that Hamas jumped the gun, unlike what Iran actually wanted. But from your point of view, give me, just before we talk about the horrors and how awful it was, how do you assess the strike against Israel?
Yeah, I think you can, let's say you can recognize the success of your enemy, even if you despise them wholeheartedly, as I do, certainly. But, you know, as you've kind of mentioned, Mordecai Kedar, and his assessment of that, I'm sure he recognizes, as most people recognize, that this was not a Hamas operation 3 weeks ago. This was not. I've watched to certain journalists and diplomats, and I think today even members of Knesset, footage that has not been seen by most people, which is absolutely horrific.
You saw that presentation?
I saw that a few days ago, and it's
how bad was it, Richard?
Incredibly bad. I mean, I've seen some very nasty and unpleasant things in real life, in the flesh, in different battlefields, but I've never seen anything quite as awful as that. And I don't need to go through all the details of it, but one thing that struck me was the way in which what appeared to be a well-organized, well-disciplined, well-prepared military force went against a load of civilians. And if you direct a military force against civilians, then it can only be an utter catastrophe. And that struck me very strongly. And these are not people who were trained in the Gaza Strip. These are not just Hamas. This is Iran. This is training by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to organize them, to equip them, to teach them how to fight in the way they did. And that's the product. And the plan was very successful. The plan surprised the IDF, and I think it surprised Hamas as well. I think they got much more success than they could ever have dreamt of, and I think more success than most of us would have dreamt of. But their plan, you rightly say, their plan is not, and their intention is not to defeat Israel or the IDF. They know they can't do that. No matter how well organized, trained, and armed they are, they cannot do that. Yes, they scored a victory then, but they're not going to win ultimately. And I think that their objective was what their objective always is, which is to entice Israel to carry out counteraction in the way that it's been doing for the last 3 weeks, to carry out airstrikes and ground operations in order to kill their civilians. The objective of that, of course, is to invite world vilification, hatred of Israel, to get other people to join in, like Hezbollah in the north, like the Houthis in Yemen, like militias in Syria, and other jihadists to join the fight, not just the fight in Israel, but the fight against Jews all around the world, as we've been seeing on university campuses and elsewhere. That's their objective and their plan, and it works like a dream every time, because the sucker media, the sucker United Nations, the sucker is probably the wrong word, because I think there's malignant intent there as well. Every single time they form part of the cycle of violence which encourages Hamas to do it again and again.
Colonel Kemp, you are a British patriot, and yet I saw over the Thames tens of thousands, maybe it was hundreds of thousands. It looked huge, huge pro-Hamas, so-called pro-Palestine rally, but really was really not a pro-Palestine rally. It was an anti-Israel, pro-Hamas rally, with no apology made for the heinous attack on Israeli citizenry and the destruction of civilian life, etc. The murder of kids at a music concert. So you mentioned this. I wasn't even going to go here, but okay, you have this international force against Israel. One of its main heads is in the UK. So I just, as a British citizen, I want to ask you, how do you understand it all? How do you deal with it? How do you understand your own country in light of that? And let's be real here. Let's be frank.
Yeah, let's be totally frank. You're absolutely right. And just to start off with, there are 3 prominent Hamas leaders living in the UK with UK passports, living in UK houses in London, known to the authorities, been there for years, photographed with some of the Hamas leaders in Gaza in the past. These are at large in the UK now, part of a prescribed terrorist organization. It's prescribed or designated in the UK as such. But this whole artifice, the whole of the what led to the demonstrations, the protests, this is the result of decades of anti-Israel propaganda. This is not pro-Palestinian stuff. This is anti-Israel stuff. It's been built up over many, many years, not just in the UK, in other European countries, in the United States and elsewhere. And the premise of it, the whole premise of it, which makes it very hard to defeat, is the fact that you, Israel, you're an illegitimate country. You've stolen Palestinian land. You have illegal settlements. You have illegal occupation. You have an apartheid state. All of this whole narrative has been embedded in the Western world for decades. And whatever happens to you, okay, I think probably any decent person, almost any decent person, would see the horrible events of 3 weeks ago as absolutely beyond description, beyond anything really that we've seen probably since either the heyday of the Islamic State or even going back to the Holocaust. But that doesn't matter because you had it coming. This was what you brought on yourselves by your horrific settler colonialist policies, and that is the narrative. And it's, you can talk to people about raping girls and beheading babies and murdering people and dragging people off into captivity in Gaza, but none of that matters because you're in the wrong, and that's right. Where it all comes from.
On a technical level, I call what you just talked about, I call that the occupation accusation. And I say that if students do not know how to answer the occupation accusation claims, then they are disarmed. Israel's got to know how to answer that. And the answer is not that we're a really good country that makes cherry tomatoes and has gay rights and even sends its planes to help places that have faced earthquakes. Those are not answers to the occupation accusations. You must make it clear that we have a right to this land. This is our land. Sadly, our government has allowed this narrative to flourish around the world by not speaking very clearly. Okay, so we covered the physical, the beginnings of the war. We covered also the international response, and you pointed out the importance of what I call the narrative war, the narrative that basically posits that Israel is in the wrong in the first place. Now let's talk about how the war is going. It's been a month. Israel decided to strike back. Israel has identified its goal as destroying Hamas. I haven't heard it clearly said or stated that the goal is to fight Iran or to fight jihadism in Israel or around the world, but specifically to deal with this, organization and to destroy it utterly. Even the conquest or retaking of or recapturing or resettling Gaza has not been discussed clearly, has not been stated as a goal. So tell me about what you think of Israel's goals and how it's been doing so far in your military estimation.
Well, I think Israel's goal is relatively clear, which is well, twofold. One of which is to clear Gaza of armed terrorist groups. That includes Hamas, it includes Islamic Jihad, it includes the other gangsters there as well. And that's a pretty well clear and defined objective. Now, that does not mean that you eradicate Hamas entirely around the world. It may mean that you kill most of them in Gaza. It may mean some of the others escape to fight another day. We don't know that, but it means basically eradicating that problem. And the second goal, of course, which the Prime Minister and others have made very clear, is a very important one, is to rescue the hostages, get them back, which is in itself one of the most demanding challenges that the IDF face, probably that they've ever faced. And I think beyond that, there's obviously questions as to what happens to Gaza afterwards. We can discuss if you want. But beyond that, we must never forget that up in the north, there are something like 150,000 missiles and UAVs controlled by Iran, operated by Lebanese Hezbollah, another proxy of Iran like Hamas and like Islamic Jihad, waiting to be unleashed. Now, the big question is whether or not they will be unleashed by Iran. Obviously, we've seen quite a lot of action up there already in lower level attacks by both Hezbollah and Hamas from Lebanon. But we may see a much more concerted attack if Iran decides the time is right for that. And Israel will obviously have to respond to that. And it may be, I might, for example, argue, and no reason why anyone should listen to me, but I would argue, I think, that should be dealt with anyway. Even if there is not a concerted attack from the north, it cannot be allowed to continue to exist after what happened 3 weeks ago. We cannot allow that. The place I'm staying in now in Tel Aviv is full of refugees from Kiryat Shimona. I've been up there in Kiryat Shimona and other places close to the border. The people are terrified, not so much of the rockets, or they should be, but of the potential for Hamas or Hezbollah coming across the border as Hamas did 3 weeks ago. So that has to be dealt with, I would argue, as soon as possible. On top of that, of course, there's the potential for even greater flare-ups in Judea and Samaria and inside, let's say, Israel proper, for want of a better word, as we've seen repeatedly. And so, the IDF's got a great deal of challenges on its hands, a huge amount of challenges. As to how it's going so far, very briefly, none of us really know much about what's happening, and that's a good thing. It's absolutely right that we should be in the dark about what the IDF is doing inside Gaza. Operational security dictates that. From what I've been able to understand, the IDF has been making some pretty good progress inside Gaza. They've been in the tunnels, they've been destroying tunnels, they've been killing quite a large number of significant Hamas commanders and fighters, destroying rocket launchers and anti-tank missile systems. So obviously it's potentially quite a long process, but from what I can see so far, we've tragically seen, as you mentioned earlier, the loss of a number of IDF soldiers already, and unfortunately we're likely to see more. But as long as it continues on course as it is now, and as long as the United States does not try and restrain Israel from prosecuting this attack to the end, I think we're going to see a successful operation inside Gaza.
Okay, so I'm trying to decide what we should go to next, but Lou, one of the producers of the show, writes, please discuss the attack from Syria and the Houthis as well. So he's trying to understand what are the other kind of players around us, because I mean, this was a news item that I saw yesterday, which was an unusual headline. It said, Yemen declares war on Israel. I was like, Yemen declares war on Israel? I was like, what's going on here? But obviously we're living in a new Middle East where Yemen is now a Iranian stronghold. And guess what? The noose around Saudi Arabia is tighter, and the Iranian machine keeps going. Now they have yet another stronghold of their ideology and their firepower. So let's talk a little bit just about that. And maybe within that question, I'll ask the follow-up question that I wanted to ask, which is, okay, what are the Americans doing here? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? They've brought in tremendous firepower, equal to most states, the amount of firepower that they've brought. Is that a good thing? So those are my two questions about Yemen and about America.
Right. Well, as you rightly say, Yemen and the Houthis in Yemen are an Iranian proxy. And of course, they're going to declare war on Israel. And you know, a few days ago, they fired a number of drones and ballistic missiles towards Israel, which were intercepted by US warships in the Red Sea. And since then, they fired more, which have been intercepted by Israel. And Israel now has missile vessels in the Red Sea itself to help defend. None of those missiles came close to Israeli territory, although they were aimed at that. And that's, of course, not the first time. We have seen in the past, we've seen missiles fired or drones fired from Yemen towards Israel. As we've seen Iranian proxies in Yemen attacking Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So this is not really, I don't think, a surprise. I don't think it's a massive challenge because I think Israel has the capability of repelling anything that Yemen can throw at it. Then, of course, you mentioned Syria as well. And there are significant Iranian proxies inside Syria, which have been pushed forward with a view to try and attacking Israel. Attempts to fire rockets at Israel from Syria have occurred. Israel has been bombing Syrian airfields in Damascus and I think Aleppo in the last few days. And of course, we know that Iran has been trying to develop a base of operations against Israel in Syria for several years, which Israel has been striking probably almost once a week for a long time. So this is the reality of what Iran calls its axis of resistance. Its proxies all around the region, directed at different countries, different allies of the US, but in particular directed at Israel. And your second question was about the US presence. I think the US
let's give we're talking about 2 carrier groups and then another Marine group is here. I've also heard rumors and I've seen some pictures that the Delta Force is here. Special forces are operating inside of Gaza already, supposedly without weapons and just advising, but who believes that? And so, there's other players here. I have a very good source who told me that tons of equipment, U.S. equipment is heading here right now in terms of rearmament for Israel. And so just everything from 5.56 bullets of M16 bullets, things like that are running short and there needs to be a resupply. That's happening. Okay, so on the one hand, we're talking about a huge arsenal, probably also including nuclear umbrella as well, that has arrived here. At the same time, there's a sense that President Biden, who gave a great speech on the one hand, is also somebody who's already starting to hint through Anthony Blinken and himself that he wants a 2-state solution. There's talk about re-empowering the PA and other solutions, including, what did I hear now? Saudi takeover of the Gaza Strip, a multinational takeover of the Gaza Strip. And we also know that President Biden, along with his predecessor, President Obama, were close to the Iranian regime, tried to make deals with them, tried to loosen succeeded in loosening what do we call the regime? When they block them from getting money, what's that called? I forgot the name, Richard. What's it called? Sanctions regime. That's right. Thank you. Undid the sanctions regime, allowed them to go towards a nuclear bomb, released $250 billion, maybe on even pallets of cash. Who knows? We're talking about people that have wanted the Iranians to come out of the little jail that they were in, have empowered them, and are now calling for a 2-state solution. On the other hand, here they are defending Israel, rearming Israel. How are we to understand the presence of the U.S. superpower on our shores here?
Very simple question. I think very simple situation. I mean, the first thing I would say is that in the same way as I believe that President Biden's foreign policy has been responsible for Russia invading Ukraine. In other words, the disgraceful and humiliating withdrawal of the US and NATO from Afghanistan. I think that empowered Putin and encouraged Putin to invade Ukraine. in the same way as that happened, I think I would lay at the door of the US foreign policy decision makers what's happening over here now, because we as you rightly laid out just then, we've seen years going back to the Obama administration and taken up again with the Biden administration. We've seen years of appeasement of Iran, encouragement of Iran, funding of Iran, allowing Iran to develop its nuclear weapons program, albeit pretending we're not doing that, but we are doing that. And then I think, more up to date than any of those things, we've seen the distancing of President Biden from the Israeli government, refusing to allow Prime Minister Netanyahu to be invited to the White House. These things, which I think all of them, when you put them together, encouraged and emboldened Iran to do what it's done now. So, I think that a lot of the blame for what's happened, obviously the blame is with Iran and with the terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, but I think a lot of culpability has to lie with the current US administration. But now they realize what they've done, I think, and they're absolutely terrified that they've let the genie out of the bottle here and have sent these massive forces to the region to try and contain it. And you mentioned the carrier strike group in the Eastern Mediterranean. The purpose of that is to deter Hezbollah from attacking Israel. I don't know how big a deterrent that is. I mean, I question whether that would actually be used. And if I question it, then I suspect Nasrallah questions it as well. And then there's the other carrier strike group, the Eisenhower carrier strike group, that is now directly threatening in the Gulf, directly threatening Iran in case it decides to either unleash Hezbollah or carry out some other form of intervention. So these things exist as deterrents. As far as US forces inside Gaza, I would take that with a bit of a pinch of salt, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if there aren't US special forces and British special forces here to do what they can to help the IDF in rescuing the hostages, if nothing else. And I think that would be an important contribution, and that using their expertise to help. But let's not forget, one comment I would make on all this is I don't believe the US should use its military force unless Israel is in a real struggle that it can't deal with. Because I think it's so important for Israel's regional deterrence and credibility that Israel is seen to fight its own war here, not rely on Big Brother from the US. But the final thing I'd say, we mentioned allied forces. We have Chinese warships in the region. We have Russian aerial surveillance and attack aircraft on 24/7 patrol in the region as well. So there are all the ingredients, and let's not even, I won't even mention them, but let's not forget Turkey and its stance on this. But I think we've got all the ingredients for something getting really out of hand here. I hope it doesn't. I'm not suggesting it's going to, but there is the potential for a much wider conflict, I think, in this region.
Okay, let's take a little bit of let's take a view of a video together just for a second of Israeli operations inside of Gaza, what it's looking like. What does that look like to you, Colonel Kemp? Does it look like Afghanistan, Iraq, Northern Ireland? What does that remind you of?
Reminds me a bit of Gaza, actually, to be honest, Yishai. But no, it's the same thing. I mean, I mentioned before, I've spoken to a lot of these troops getting ready to go into action, including some of the ones that you will have seen in that footage in the last few days. And what I would say is talking to them is inspirational. These young men, and in many cases old men who are reservists called up to fight as well. They are what struck me, and it's as much the same as with British soldiers getting ready to go into action. There was a degree of apprehension because they know the real dangers they face, but there was absolutely no question about their commitment and their determination. And this is where one of the differences is between the IDF and, let's say, British forces in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever, American forces. Yeah, they're very similar. The IDF wear a strange sort of green uniform, whereas we wear a camouflage uniform. And a lot of them, most of them, all of them speak with some strange language that I struggle to understand, although there are many Brits and Americans and others among them. But this is one of the big differences here, I think, is that these soldiers are fighting on their own doorstep. We were fighting thousands of miles from home. These are fighting on their own doorstep. They know what happened 3 weeks ago. They're absolutely committed to protecting their families, their friends, their countrymen, their land. And it was, for me, talking to them was very humbling, actually, as well as inspirational. I'm sure, knowing what I know of the IDF, I'm sure they will do an extraordinary job inside Gaza. And I have little doubt. I mean, it's going to be tough. We are going to see more casualties, but it's going to be, I think, ultimately a victory for the IDF, which is sorely needed now. And above all, I mean, I would go back to the issue of the hostages, which none of us should ever have out of our minds. Those poor people who are in tunnels or other buildings, monsters. What they can be thinking, I have no idea. I've been involved in hostage rescue situations in the past, but that's in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's involved maybe 2-3 people in different incidents. Even that is immensely challenging. When you've got over 200, I don't even like to think about the challenges that are faced by the IDF in getting them out. But I think if any army in the world can rescue even some of those hostages, then I think it's the IDF.
I think I have a clip here that I marked British soldier, and I thought maybe I would put that on. I think it's a long clip, so I won't play all of it, but let's see what this British Israeli soldier has to say.
Hi, everyone in Tel Aviv. This is Ben. We're here on the northern border, preparing for whatever might happen here. It's amazing to see what you guys are doing and all the things you're donating, but there are a lot of things that you could get rather than sweets or snacks that make a big difference when you're preparing to go into combat. A lot of things that even combat soldiers have forgotten because it's been a long time. I'm going to share with you a few of those things that you can buy in the supermarket that can make a big difference and explain why they can make a big difference to l'ediek atkhem. So let's have a look at some of the things. First of all, this black sellotape. Especially Tessa, if you can get it, is a company we use on everything. It ties our gear to our weapons to make sure that we don't lose what we use. For example, here, okay? We use it on all our equipment, our magazines. It's really important. If you can get black sellotape, especially Tessa, that could be very helpful. Then we have paracord or any kind of rope you can get like this from Ricochet. We use it again to tie our equipment to us to make sure we don't lose it if we go behind enemy lines, if we go into combat. Really important things, you can buy these almost anywhere. First aid kits, okay? You don't know where the medic's gonna be if you're on the front. There are especially important things you can get, like small bandages like this that can make a big difference. Or you can go into Superfarm and get Leukoplast, which will deal with small cuts. Like.
All right, so there's he's talking about really what's needed out there, but he's I guess a British Israeli soldier from the accent. And we saw the tanks operating. There's one more video that I wanted to play while you're here.
Before you do, that guy is a good friend of mine. I know him very well, and I saw him a few days ago up at Nazariya. All
right, what's his name? You remember his name?
Dan.
So he's out there fighting for us, and he's a cool guy. And I've tons of videos of English language soldiers making great videos, explaining themselves, explaining why we're fighting this battle. Let's just look at another one, really. Here's another English-speaking soldier.
I was going through my personal items this morning, and I found something that shocked me and gave me a real realization of why we're here. I don't know who put it in, but as I was going through, I found this. My son's toy Sefer Torah. Someone probably put it into my personal belongings right before I left on Simchat Torah on Shabbat. I look at this and I say that this is the reason that we're here. We're here in the name of Hashem to spread goodness, to spread light onto Am Yisrael and onto the whole world. And we're here for our children and our children's children and for the rest of the generations of Am Yisrael. And I want to be very clear, Am Yisrael Chai. We're here because of Hashem. Hashem gave us this land. He promised it to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov, And we're here thousands of years later, still defending the same land. And the reason that we're here is to spread goodness. We're here in the name of good. Be'ezrat Hashem, this coming Shabbat, go to your shul, kiss the Torah, come back home, give your kids a blessing and give them a big hug and a kiss, and tell them everything will be okay. Am Yisrael is a very strong nation. We're going to go on, and we're going to get stronger, and we're going to defeat our enemies, and together.
All right, so that was quite a that was an English-speaking soldier with a lot of heart and a lot of spiritual messaging. And here's another English-speaking soldier. If I recall, this video is kind of more hard-nosed about the battle.
Dear brothers and sisters from Toronto, Greenberg asked me to post this, so here I am next to Gaza Strip. Let me first, if I may, calm you down and say that. Everything will be okay. The worst is behind us. And our mission now is to move on, to look forward. Let me just say that we're about to witness a significant turning point in the long timeline of our people's history. But how are we to make this change? How are we to avenge the dead? How are we to restore the national pride? David HaMelech answers, Lo b'chayil velo b'koach ki im beruchi Amar Hashem Tzvakot. Lo b'chayil, not with this metal piece. Velo b'koach, not with this metal piece. Ki im beruchi, with the spirit, with the support that we've been getting from you, from Jews all around the world. Only then we can win. The equation is very, very simple. As long as we get the full support of you, the people, the tzibur, victory is sure to come. Not a question of.
Okay, so there's some of the boys out there, and there's what do you call it in the military language? Esprit de corps. Is that did I pronounce that right? Was that
French.
Right?
We don't use French in the British Army. No, you're right. It is esprit de corps, comradeship, whatever, band of brothers. It all means the same sort of thing, and it's absolutely fundamentally important because when you're fighting, yes, of course, you're fighting for your country, for your family, your friends. But I think at the moment of battle, you're fighting for the people to your left, to your right, behind you. You're fighting for your brothers in arms. And a military unit, particularly a military unit in combat, is closer than family. And it's so important. If you expect somebody to get up out of a trench or get out of an armored personnel carrier and expose themselves to risk of death, then you've got to have that, what you would call esprit de corps or brotherhood among the troops, and it's very, very evident from everything I've seen among the IDF soldiers I've met in recent days.
Let's just take a few comments from the folks listening right now. First, Moshe Herman, my friend and one of my producers and a close buddy of mine, says the jihad is at war with the West. When will we wake up? What do you say to that, Richard?
I think it's absolutely right, and you know it was the case before 9/11, and if 9/11 didn't make it obvious, then I don't know what would have done. But nevertheless, we did not wake up. Even if we woke up briefly, we've been back to sleep again. So I mean, the answer is I don't know the answer. I do know that we need to wake up, and as I said right at the beginning, this is not just Israel's fight. This is a fight for the whole of the civilized world in which jihad and jihadists are ranged against us. And you saw it on the streets of London. You've seen it in the United States. These people want to change our society. They want to bring us down. And the spearhead is jihadists here in the Middle East, particularly those who are led and funded and armed by Iran. And you know, it is actually absolutely sickening to see the level of appeasement that we've seen, not just from the United States, not just from Obama and Biden, but also from the British governments and other European governments who think that, I think Churchill's words were something like, if you feed the crocodile, maybe he will eat you last, something like that. That's an abbreviation of what he said. And that's the mentality that we face. And anyone can sit here and say, we've got to wake up, but I'm not sure I have the confidence that our leaders today will wake up and will deal with this problem.
I want to tell you, Colonel Kemp, that coincidentally, in the last few weeks before this attack, I have been reading a book called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, right? It's a very famous book. And I was just at the chapters dealing with a Chamberlain and his appeasement of Hitler, specifically of the giveaway of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland there. What I didn't know is how important the Sudetenland was. I knew there was a German population there, but I did not understand that there were massive defenses, fortress defenses and walls and a whole heap of defenses that were really good, the thing that could have stopped Hitler, and he was absolutely unable to defeat that. But he, through political machinations and through what the author describes as almost an obsessive need by Chamberlain to appease Hitler, that's the way he described it. Really, the war was given to great success to the Nazis to move forward with their effort to conquer all of Europe and to eradicate the Jews. So appeasement, is, in hindsight, it's absurd, it's ridiculous, but in the time you see that people do that. I mean, I must tell you that there are reports now of the few surviving female soldiers who were the video monitors. They were the information. They manned the monitors that made sure that they checked on what's happening on the other side. And they said, no, we've been reporting for months that they're training for a breakthrough right across from us. It's happening underneath our very nose. Okay, so you're talking about appeasement. I mean, we look the other way. We fund the jihad. We allow it to happen. We give them territory. We the West sends money to them, etc., to Iran. It's like, my question to you is, I want to phrase it in a question is, where's the repentance going to be to come back to a policy of common sense?
I'm not sure there's going to be that repentance or even recognition, or certainly not admittance of the culpability here. But I think, my biggest fear in this situation, my biggest hope is that by Israel smashing the hell out of Hamas and hopefully Hezbollah as well, this will give Iran, even if they only deal with Hamas, it will give Iran a bloody nose. And there's only one thing that deters people, and that's strength. Weakness provokes and encourages offensive and aggressive action. And my biggest concern is that the United States, Biden does not have a great track record in the foreign policy world. He doesn't have a great track record in supporting Israel either. Yes, what he's done, some of his speeches and his deployment of US forces has been a good thing. But I just wonder how long that will last, how long he will maintain the strength to back Israel in this fight before he wants to start putting more pressure on Netanyahu to back down and have some kind of accommodation, which is effectively, that is appeasing. It's appeasing Iran, and it's appeasing organizations like the United Nations, human rights councils, and human rights groups, and all of them, so much of the media that's raged against Israel. These people, they're ripe to be appeased by Biden, and I just hope that he is able to have the strength to continue to allow Israel to do what it has to do. And if that doesn't happen, it's not just a catastrophe for Israel. It's a real catastrophe for the whole of the Western world.
So there's a lot on the line here, and according to your understanding, this is not just a small kind of little battle between a dissident group and Israel. I see that you're painting this in much more global and civilizational colors. Is that right?
Yeah, and even if you just take one aspect of it, which is, let's say, the rise of the Islamic State. When the Islamic State was in its heyday, in Syria and Iraq in particular, okay, the Islamic State still exists, but it's been largely smashed. It still exists. There are still elements in places like Afghanistan and the Middle East and elsewhere. But when it was in its heyday, it inspired so much terrorism. Jihadists from the UK and from other countries in Europe and other countries around the world went to fight with it, were inspired and encouraged by it, came back well trained, well prepared, the Islamic State and Al Qaeda as well encouraged attacks in our countries. We've seen some terrible terrorist attacks, even if you don't include 9/11. We've had some terrible terrorist attacks in the UK, in London, in Manchester, in other parts of the country, inspired by this jihadism. And if these jihadists here succeed and are not completely vanquished by Israel, then that will further inspire terrorism in all of our countries. And we've already seen it. We've already seen the beginnings of it in France and in Belgium. And no doubt there are plenty of others in other countries that have been at least disrupted by our intelligence and security services so far. But it won't be the end of them if Israel does not succeed here.
Very important point that you just made, which is the opposite of appeasement. Appeasement and losses, any kind of loss to the jihad encourages them, inspires them, and they get wind in their sails from it, and they continue on and on. They want more. A long time ago, there was this famous film in America called Little Shop of Horrors, right? Which was about this plant that just kept eating people because this guy Seymour kept feeding it. And I always think that the plant's name was the Audrey 2, and this Audrey 2 was the jihad. You keep feeding it, it just grows bigger and bigger. Yep. until it eats more and more. Let's just comments from Ellie, who writes, "It breaks my heart to see the Jewish people who are afraid for their lives in so many countries. Have we learned nothing since World War II? How can this be happening? It's shameful." And it is a tricky moment. I want to tell you, Colonel Kemp, I was in the United States a week and a half ago for a short lightning trip, and guess what I saw? I saw something that it was hard for me to see, and I wasn't expecting to see, but I saw Jews that were scared in the streets of Philadelphia and the streets of New York as well, and on campus, forget about it. So it's as you said, it's not just a Israel question now. It's really has a global effect, even just specifically on Jews. Comments on that?
Well, it's the same in the UK, and I've spoken to many of my Jewish friends and acquaintances in the UK who also are very fearful about what's happening on our streets, and understandably so. And it's what I sort of alluded to it before, but this is the result of decades of a slur campaign, a narrative that's been developed against Israel in all of our countries, and the focus of it, inspired by Hamas, inspired by the jihadists over here, the focus of these protest demonstrations of various different groups in university campuses in the UK, Europe, US, is not on Israel. They're not. Yeah, they're anti-Israel, but their focus is not on Israel. Their focus is on the Jewish diaspora in their countries. They want to terrify, intimidate the Jews at the universities in particular, but not just the universities, so that they stop supporting Israel. They have it that they become so scared, whether it be physically scared or scared of being cancelled or branded as Israel supporters, that they stop supporting Israel. And it's being successful. There's a lot of Jewish students on university campuses in the US, UK who will speak against Israel, or who will shut up and take their keepers off and not have a mezuzah on the door and not wear the Star of David. And it's a way of intimidating them. Why do they want to intimidate them? Well, obviously there is anti-Semitism, but they also know that the strongest supporters of Israel in the United States and the UK and elsewhere are the Jewish community, and they want to undermine that and stop it. So these people are focused on that. And I would say to any of your listeners or viewers who are wondering what to do to help, I would say above all, support those Jewish students on university campuses in whatever way you can. Support the organizations that try and give them strength and try and help them fight, because that is where I think the greatest victory is coming outside of Israel for the jihadists.
Very good. Very important point, and that personally inspired me. Let's do one more comment, and that is from your countryman and my friend, Dr. Mark Pickles. He writes, "Islamism is the prevalent philosophy of Islam today." I think he means to say jihadism and radical Islamism, including in the UK. The West enables Islamism, whereas we should be supporting the Muslim reformers who themselves are oppressed by the Islamists. What do you think?
No, he's absolutely right. As Dr. Mark Pickles is absolutely right on pretty much everything. But the problem is we go back to this one word, appeasement. And in countries like, take the UK, there's the whole alliance between Islamism, jihadism, and the left-wing political movement, the woke movements in Europe and the US. There's that alliance which terrifies the politicians, and the other factor is that they have that there are a large, there's a lot of Muslims in the UK, and they make up a big chunk of the electorate. And if let's say a significant number of them is anti-Israel or is even pro-jihadism in some cases, you don't want to annoy them, you don't want to offend them. You need to appease them because you need their votes. So the best thing is to probably lie about the reality, which is what many politicians have been doing for too many years. Because frankly, they and I'm not suggesting for a moment that all or even the majority of Muslims are on the side of jihadism, because of course they're not. Most of them simply want the same quiet life as the rest of us want. But there is a significant portion of them who are on that side and who the politicians do feel they need to appease. Because what they don't do, they don't look at the bigger picture, they don't look at the longer term threat. In many cases, they're simply looking at the next 5 years until the next election, and the votes are what they need.
Mark Pickles adds, he says, not a doctor, ex-corporal RAF, and with a smiley face. So
he's
God
a doctor to me.
That's right. Colonel Richard Kemp, you're a doctor to many of us. Your amazing service in the British Army lasted for 30 years, but you continue to be a fighter. Your slogan, keep attacking, is a personal inspiration to me. Thank you very much for being on the show, but thank you even more for coming to Israel in this time of her need and in this fight. And may we see days of success ahead, the eradication of those enemies, and a freer world through that, and not, God forbid, the opposite. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Yishai. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for having me. And all I would say is I wish the very best of luck and victory to the IDF in this tremendous struggle that they're facing.
Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you so much for joining us. That was awesome, a discussion with Colonel Kemp. Not only was it spot on, but it was also deep, and we had a chance to really discuss with him the issues that are so important. And I think it's so important also sometimes to see it the way Kemp sees it, which is from the outside a little bit, and how big it is. Even I was like, you know what, that it's really big, because sometimes when you're in it, you're like, okay, I'm just struggling in my personal conflict, but it's much bigger than that. I got Valerie, who writes, first, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. That was Martin Neumoller, right, a Lutheran clergyman, a Christian. Christians, says Valerie, should be standing up and speaking out in blessings for Israel. I agree with that. Anybody who loves freedoms and loves liberty and hates the idea of being subjected by just a mob of thugs has to stand up right now. Speaking of that, Khaleb Masharga says the Zionists must leave Palestine, all the Zionists. Well, Khaleb, we're not going anywhere. This is our land. It's even in the Quran. And we are going to be here forever. And this war we're going to fight. And we're going to win this fight because we have God on our side. Allah's on our side. And we're going to defeat the people who want to kill women and children and fight without any honor whatsoever. No, these are not real men. They hide in caves. They kill women. This is not Islam. And this is not going to win either. Khaleb says Israel is a rogue state. It's only rogue if you don't believe in God or history. We are going to definitely continue to fight. Let's take a look. Just one more film. Let's take a look at what the son of one of the Hamas founders who went the other way has to say about the situation today.
إسرائيل دولة لا مقام لها على أرضنا.
Not this one. Sorry, that was a different one. Let's take a look
around
here.
the globe, and even in our capital, people are protesting for Hamas. They're saying for the Israel to back off and stop with the airstrikes. Well, what do you say to those protesters? What is about their mindset?
Okay, listen, I cannot convince the entire world of truth. Right now, people are emotional. They hate to see children dying. Even though, Hamas is killing the people at the hospital and we have evidence of that, but they still blame Israel. People can blame whoever they want, but now we have to concentrate. We have to focus. Public opinion is very important, but unfortunately, it's not the time to win the public opinion. It's the time to win the war against the most brutal terrorist organization living today, And later on, when people look back at the situation, they will understand what we were doing. We should not be afraid of the public opinion. We have to explain as much as we can.
And you're doing
but
that.
Now we have to concentrate on our goals.
So that was Musab Yusuf, and he's the Green Prince, and he's out there talking about how Israel has to not even try to win public opinion, but rather just win the war and destroy the bad guys. And that's how brutal they are. Very, very powerful video, and he's been giving great interviews. And if you guys have any contacts for him, I'll try to have him on the show here on the Yishai Fleisher Show. I want to bless everybody and thank you very much for being with me. That was a very important hour. Keep connected with me through YishaiFleisher.com. And we're going to put this together with Malka Fleisher for this week's radio podcast, and other people are going to add in their audios to this week's show. We put out a show every single week. Please join us there. Please also support the various campaigns of fighting for Israel's rights right now. One of them is through HebronFund.org. That's supporting the Jewish people's first purchase in the land of Israel, Abraham's first purchase, and the first city of the Jewish people, the first capital of King David, and also a city that's surrounded by an Arab city, mostly ruled by Hamas. So HebronFund.org. Check out my other fund that I'm working for to help the communities around Judea and Samaria, especially in Judea, and the folks that I know. I'm just trying to help people defend themselves better and have first response needs and stay healthier. And that's at fightforisrael.org. Check that out as well. And my good buddy, Ben Goldstein at unitywarriors.com is doing a great job fighting, keeping us united and keeping us fighting. He's helped me a lot myself. So all that is, and there's many more. There's many more good organizations that are doing unbelievable work. I'll have more video about some of other people's work next time. But check out YishaiFleisher.com for all the other stuff that we're doing, that we're putting out, including videos, including our great Instagram page with tons of videos that are of cool stuff that's happening right now. So join us there. Twitter, a little bit more political fighting, and our Facebook, and our YouTube. So sign up, be part of it. It's happening all the time. And the whole point here is to be connected to Israel. If you're connected through YishaiFleisher.com or through me, you're connected to Israel and to the God of Israel. That's it. It's just that simple. You're connected to the land, the city, the state, the city of Jerusalem, the people of Israel, the city of Hebron, and of course the vision of God in this world. Be'ezrat Hashem, we can only try to reflect all that amazing stuff. And so we are fighting. And here's Ian says, I stand with Israel. And Oke Chuku says, God bless Israel. Go right back at you, brother. And Stephen says, God bless the IDF. And people from all around are saying, blessing Israel to be continuously strong, like Ivang, who says, long live Israel, I support you. And people from all over the world are standing strong with Israel. I want to bless you wherever you are to continue to stand strong with Israel. I want to thank you for your support and thank you for your prayers. Keep it up, because the war is far from over. And as Richard Kemp said, it's a big war, okay? It's a big deal, and it's going to touch you one way or the other. If you fight for it and help Israel win, help the forces of light and goodness win, the world will be a better place and you'll be affected by it. Stand back, don't do a thing. Well, God forbid, Don't ever underestimate the enemy. He's got power, and a darkness could come over the world, God forbid. As we will not let that happen, and we hope, we pray, we ask that Hashem does not let that happen as well. God bless you wherever you are. Stay tuned, stay strong, stay connected. Lots of love. Thank you to all, and shalom. And thank you. Oh, and I knew it in my heart. There was one more person to thank. And I want to thank Yishai Fleisher, my awesome producer and daughter, for helping me make the show strong. And maybe we can have her on the show next time as well to give us the young person's perspective on what's going on. All right, folks. Let's see. We got Uchechi Bobby says, win, Israel. Be'ezrat Hashem. God bless you, folks. Stay tuned, stay strong, stay connected, and shalom.